If you can't find it, you can't use it. This is true of any content, whether it's a photo in your personal collection or a product page on your retail website. In this session, we're going to learn how to make content more visible using keywords. Content visibility will allow you, your customers, and the search engines to easily find your content. Welcome to Dope Content. I'm your host, Laura Bergels, and with me is co-host Scott Smith. And our special guest today is Clemency Wright. Clemency is a content visibility expert, and she's joining us from Newcastle upon Tyne in Northern England. And Clemency is an online digital search consultant. She develops the methodologies and strategies needed to apply relevant, accurate, and consistent keywords for online customers and users. Clemency also provides keywording strategy workshops that facilitate engagement with target markets across the digital space. In our session today, Clemency will lead us in a workshop sharing her expertise in keyword approaches that promote content visibility. So Clemency, let's get started right away.
So today I'm really pleased to be running through with you a very brief keywording workshop, which I'm hoping will be fun and interactive because I've got a couple of willing students here to walk us through the keywording process and talk you through the way my mind works when I'm keywording content. So just a little bit of an intro about how we'll be doing that today. I'm going to give a little bit of a background to keywording in case some of you are not so familiar with what that actually is. And then I want to talk briefly about why keywording is important for businesses, particularly online businesses. We'll also have a very brief look at some of the methods and processes that we use when we're keywording content. And then, as I say, towards the end, we'll spend a little bit of time with an image, a couple of student keyworders, and we'll walk through the process together. So, as I say, this is a brief introduction about keywording. Well, what are keywords? That's probably the first question that you might want to ask me. Keywords describe the key elements of a photo or a video, or they can be text-based files as well. So they describe what we can see happening in the photograph or the video, and these keywords also signify some meaning around those words. So there's added value to the words that we're assigning to this sort of content. The information that is assigned can be searched and retrieved on a digital system. So this could be any type of system, from a search engine or an in-house database, something on site, something in the enterprise, anywhere where you have a search box or a folder structure, a hierarchy of some kind for your users or customers to navigate to your content. So the process here is very much about describing key elements, having some signifier or associated meaning behind those, and then assigning this to the records themselves in your system, because this is the main way that your users and customers will be able to retrieve the relevant content. So this often is referred to as part of the digital asset management system. Digital assets are, as I mentioned, photos, videos, files, text-based files, audio files, they could be music files, any kind of digitized information, visual or otherwise, that is housed on some kind of a search system or search engine. So in terms of business, businesses can record everything that happens, from the activities, the goods and services that they might sell onto their consumers, by using metadata assigned to their digital assets. And of course, this is really important because this can help promote the goods and services online as something customers can buy, search for and buy. Anything from products for the home, holidays, car insurance, this kind of thing, all requires some kind of metadata. But also what we're finding is that these keywords can help promote the company values for a business. So they may relate to other copy that you have within your marketing campaign or within your advertising terminology. So very often keywords will reflect the culture, and they will be indicators and signifiers of the kind of organization you are and the kind of customers you want to connect with ultimately. And of course, because keywords are attached to assets online in the retail space on e-commerce websites, they also help to sell the product. So this could be either a physical product, a keyword that's attached maybe at some point to the packaging design, as opposed to a keyword that's attached to a photograph of the packaging that is available on a grocery website, for example. So the process it's quite extended. It goes from recording information to promoting goods and services, cultural values of the business, and then ultimately to sell and convert that and monetize the data somehow. So in thinking about why we would want to keyword, we first of all need to understand our business sector, because this helps channel the keywords so that they're relevant for our users. Your business might want to think about how you use visual media. So do you use images and videos on social media? Do you use them on Instagram or Facebook or other platforms? How do you want to be able to catalogue that content so that you can retrieve it and reuse it perhaps? Do you have an image library? Do you manage your visual assets in a database? Do you have a digital asset management system that holds these? Is this available to all of your teams and offices globally, or is it siloed between, one department has certain assets and a different department has completely different ones? What we often find is there are assets in existence. There are lots of photographs and videos within organisations that aren't really centralised, and they're not very well managed, and they're not easy to find. So this is one of the starter questions that you might want to ask if you're thinking about improving your keywording strategy. And as I mentioned previously, they tell stories. So assets help to connect you with your potential customer base. They help you target new groups, demographic groups, types of buyers that you're looking to break into that market. So the story of a visual asset, for example, a photograph, may need to be keyworded in such a way that you can find the assets across keywords like ethnicity or gender, or maybe it's regional keywords for specific locations. And all of these help to businesses to tell their story, not only visually, but also, again, through repeating these keywords in their broader marketing and advertising lexicon. So there are lots of methods and processes, and when I've spoken about this before, I've gone into a lot of detail, which I don't really have time to do today, but I've just got a couple of brief slides to give you as an example. So a method of keywording could be where you just have a photograph and a text field, and you literally type in keywords that you think relate to that photograph or that video. The problem with this is we call this unstructured keywording. It happens all the time. It's a very common starting point for businesses, but what we try and do is help them think about some of the problems associated with unstructured keywords and what the impact can be to the business and the users. So they often tend to be inconsistent. They can be limitless. They can go on and on because people don't know when to stop keywording. They can be quite unpredictable in terms of the search results that this yields. Disorganized, ambiguous. We might have keywords that have multiple meanings. For example, the keyword bow, spelt B-O-W. It could be a hair bow. It could be a bow on a shoe. It could be a bow of a ship, or a bow and arrow. So we've got one word with multiple meanings, and this can really impact on the user experience when keywording. And obviously, when you've got unstructured data, it tends to be more unreliable and it's more subjective because you have different people who think differently about what they're seeing. So therefore, the choices they make when keywording can be so diverse. Now, this is a good thing because we want to capture everybody's opinions and interpretations, but we need to think about the user. Keywording should always be user-focused because it is part of the user experience. So in an attempt to improve on this situation where we've got unstructured keywords, we work with clients to create structure. And when you create structure from your unstructured keywords, you get optimized search results. So the flow of this process would be that you're taking some data which is unstructured and it's just a whole bunch of keywords with no kind of rhyme nor reason, and you're trying to put them into some kind of a system. So digital asset management system or some other system, and there are lots of them. This will then become part of your metadata schema. So keywords are one part of a bigger chunk of data called metadata, which can include things like when an image was photographed, where it was photographed, who photographed it. These are all separate pieces of metadata, and keywords fit in that part of the process. And there's also an opportunity to move that data then into what we call a controlled vocabulary. And this is where you organize keywords almost like you would do a dictionary. And there may be a synonym, so it's also like a thesaurus. And this sits behind your search engine or behind your search system. It's not something customers or end users typically see, but in some cases that is desirable. But what it does is it powers the keywords that a user types into a search box in the back end, and then it returns a more structured set of results. So we're moving from unstructured keywords using the system, metadata fields, controlled vocabulary to create structured keywords. And of course, the ultimate goal here is to make the content more searchable, more findable, and it's all about the user experience. So that was a very quick whiz through some of the fundamentals of keywording. But as we said, this is mainly today a keywording session because you really learn about keywording by doing. And before we start thinking about systems and controlled vocabularies and things like that, we need to get our heads in the right frame of mind to think about a visual and just decide on what sort of keywords we should be adding and perhaps which keywords we should be avoiding. So with Laura and Scott today, I'd like to have a go at doing some keywording. So what we've got here is a little exercise with the image of the wooden blocks and potentially some types of keywords. We might call these keyword categories or types. And the thinking here is that when we start keywording in an unstructured way, we're still trying to think about structuring keywords in the long run, knowing that the more structure and strategy we put into the keywording, the better the user results will be. So this is a piece of software called Mural, which I use to help train people when they're learning about keywording. And it's a really nice way of quickly walking through the actual process. So this will allow Laura and Scott to enter some keywords that they think are suitable for this particular picture. And as a kind of editor, I will take the keywords, talk about them, perhaps comment on some, and start moving them around as we start to think about where they might fit best, in terms of a keywording record. So if you want to kick things off, Laura and Scott, okay. I will have a go.
Well, I'm here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and you're in England, and all I need to do is click in here and just describe what those things are. Like I might go ABC blocks, right? That's fair. It's a phrase instead of a word. That's okay, isn't it?
This is fine. So this is two words, if you like. So the ABC and the blocks. So we would call this a compound keyword. And what that means is you create one keyword in your thesaurus or hierarchy that has more than one word to it, and that's absolutely fine. So we're going to put this compound keyword up here as this is a visible element of the image. These are literally what we're seeing are ABC blocks, and we're seeing blocks. And I talked about ambiguity as well earlier on. Block is quite ambiguous. Is there a way you can make that less ambiguous? Can you clarify what you mean by block?
By adding another word?
Yeah, is there another more clear way of saying that, do you think?
I added alphabet blocks, ABC blocks, six-sided squares.
So I would probably, as a customer, I might search for wooden block for these particular blocks.
Okay.
So I might,
wooden and not wood, right?
Well, again, there's the possibility that some customers might type in wood blocks, some type wooden blocks, some type it with a plural, some don't. So depending on your search system, and we touched on that briefly earlier, you may need to add all the variations. If your search system uses stemming, you probably don't need to add the plural. So for my clients, it will depend on a lot on their technology as to whether we add all the variations or not. But yeah, these are more to do with what they mean. So we, at the beginning of my little presentation, we talked about keywords having the keywords signify something or have some kind of a meaning, or they convey something other than what you can see. So this is about learning. So these are learning toys, but we would say that this is more, the phrase learning toy is more about what it signifies and conveys. So we're going to put that in a slightly different category. Spelling toy, again, maybe aligned with this. Stacking. This is a description for the arrangement of the objects, which is useful because if you're an art director or a picture buyer looking to find imagery that talks about or conveys a sense of organization or structure or stability, that you might actually look for objects that are stacked. So here's a keyword that we can add to help people, customers in those particular and specific ways. Piling is interesting because cubes don't tend to pile. So you might have a pile of, say, flour or grain because it gets dumped and it piles up. Kind of geometric shapes, we tend to use the keyword stack as opposed to pile, but I think this is something that shows the kind of nuances of language and the fact you really need to think about what your end users will search for and what they will expect to find when they type in two different words like this. Will they expect to find something that's more of a pile, disorganized, perhaps a little bit messy? So I'll just keep working through now and try and move this off. Oh, we have lots of keywords here. So yeah, we've got some similar keywords, which if you have the capacity to do so in your search engine, you might synonymize these. And that means where you have a preferred term or the keyword you will have visible to your end user. And behind that, hidden away in the back end of your search engine or your website, you will have synonyms, terms that mean the same thing but are different. And this means that whenever someone types, you could synonymize, let's say, wood cube and wood block, so that if a customer typed one or the other, they would always still get the same results. So you quickly run out of space on this tool, but what I can do as a follow-up is send a kind of tidied up version of this because I may need to start overlapping information. Yes, so we've got.
Oh, that's fine. Did I I'm an over brainstormer, so I'll stop.
This is really useful, and I just need to make sure that I can capture any other concepts that you may have. So we've got quite a few descriptive terms coming in for the visible elements, and this is very typical for when people keyword, is that what they see is the first thing they keyword, but it's encouraging people to think about what that means. So just kind of to reiterate my point about the associations around education, learning, development, maybe childhood. I know that these blocks aren't necessarily used by children to play with because they're, you know, beautifully handcrafted blocks that are more ornamental. But if you were keywording children's toys, for example, you'd probably be adding a few more conceptual terms as well. So we've got some keywords around the heritage of the toys, which I understand for this particular brand, that's a very important thing. And we would want to add these as keywords because that helps them become searchable. And as I say, a lot of keywords around how they look. So to describe the actual visible element of the block. So we've got things around the ink and multicolor. Multicolor is often a term that we would use when one object is multicolored and has lots of different colors to it, as opposed to a number of different objects that are different color. You would need to ask yourself, if you were tagging your content, whether your customers would consider these multicolored or a selection of blocks that are different colors. So this would be something, in some research you'd need to do into your customers and how they use keywords. You can do this by looking at the search logs on a website to see the words that people have used. And that's a really interesting thing to do because it will tell you where you're getting no hits. And that might not be because you don't have those products or those, you know, that information. It might be just that you haven't tagged it or thought to tag it in the same way that the customer is doing it. So I'll keep assigning these. Desk toys. So I've added this one here, which is technical and design, and this kind of refers more to the image itself. Are there any descriptive words you can use about this type of image if you were a designer, for example, looking for this particular kind of image as opposed to one in situ, you know, on an actual desk?
Photograph. I like that one. And because that really describes what it is. It's a photograph of blocks stacked, piled.
So, yeah, and this is often called a studio photograph or a studio shot with a white background and a plain background, because with some copy space, these are the sorts of terms that an art buyer might use to look, because they may be wanting to put some branding here for the company, or they may want a special offer sticker here. So they're looking for some copy space around this image of the product. In some cases, an image like this may even be what they call a clipping path image, which means you can, you know, in your editing suite or your post-production software, you can clip out everything around the edges and just take those blocks and put them onto something else in one kind of quick function. So that these sort of technical keywords are useful for the designers and well, graphic designers that might be looking for images online or content to use within their campaigns.
I'm adding something weird. I just counted the blocks and there's 13 of them. Would that be something to add or not?
Yeah, number of objects is a really popular keyword, and how we normally express that is not in this compound way. So we would have 13 objects, 12 objects, 2 objects, and then we would have what the object is. So you'd have 13 objects, wooden blocks. This means on a search engine, for example, a stock photo library, if you typed in 13 wooden blocks, the search engine would understand 13 as 13 objects, so that needs to be a tag, and wooden blocks as a separate keyword, that needs to be a tag. It passes them together, so it will then return any images that have both the keyword 13 objects and wooden blocks, and you would get exactly this result. So it's a very valid keyword. I just recommend splitting up the compound term into the 2 separate terms. So I would have 13 objects as one keyword and then wooden blocks as a different keyword. And this is all about writing the keywords in a way that a search engine can understand or parse them as accurately as possible. So we've got nobody in the picture. A lot of art buyers, people searching online for content, like to filter out whether there are people or not. So if we can add a keyword for nobody, that is one helpful feature for busy picture buyers, busy graphic designers who don't have much time to trawl through lots and lots of images on the internet, to be able to quickly find the images that don't have people. That can be very useful. So they are alphabet blocks. Have we got the keyword for numbers as well? Because we have got a number on and a mathematical symbol here as well. So there's a few other elements to it.
Oh, they're math toys also.
Yeah, they are. So there's lots going on, you can see. Lots and lots of keywords. So do you remember my slide about unstructured data and the fact that it's limitless? I think you're probably experiencing or starting to understand how keywording can be a bit like, when do I stop? You know, you could literally keep going and going and going. I think our job as keywording strategists is to, well, know when to stop and know when to start controlling these keywords so they don't just become, you know, endless. Ultimately, there will be an optimum kind of number or an optimum strategy in terms of the types of keywords you need to add. And we do try to adhere to that because, you know, data, it creates a lot of noise on a search engine. It can slow down the system. It can weaken search results. So we want to make sure that the keywords retain the absolute essence of what it is we're trying to say. And as a training exercise, this has shown that different people have a lot of different ideas and suggestions. In a real project, of course, we may end up with far fewer keywords than we're actually seeing here. This might actually be stripped back by about 50%, I would say. But we do need to make sure all the important terms are covered. And these keywords are really useful and really current and relevant. So these are the sort of things that people will be searching for to find conceptual imagery. They're not necessarily thinking about wooden blocks or the type of STEM toys they're looking for. They just want to see STEM toys. So that you need to have that added so that people can do a search more broadly for all the types of STEM toys and not have to go, oh, wooden block STEM toys and construction STEM toys and, you know, science experiment STEM toys. We can just add that one tag and allow users to search in a really broad way, as well as adding the more specific tags for more specific searches as well.
Took me this long to notice there were animals on the blocks.
Yeah.
Do I need to add animals?
Yeah. So I think one side is an animal, one side is a number, one side is a letter, and then it possibly has the symbol, the, you know, or some other.
I see an equal sign.
Yeah. So the thing with relevancy when keywording is that although we can see the dog and the cat, which are animals, we need to question whether adding that keyword is actually beneficial or misleading. Because if you are on a database looking for toys that are cat toys, or not toys for cats, but toys that are about cats or featuring dogs, would this be a really good search result? And I think my answer would be not really, because they're not really highlighting the animal in this particular shot. They're kind of highlighting a more generic toy that has different facets to it. So as a keyword, I may not be that specific, and I may not add the specific keyword dog or cat. However, animal you might just get away with, because animal is more generic. And again, if you're looking for toys that have animals on, you'd see that and think, oh yeah, it is. It's a toy with an animal, and I'm quite happy with that. But as I say, if you were looking for toys with dogs on and cats on, you might go, well, that's a little bit, you know, weak. So keyworders need to think about how far to go and when to make that decision. This keyword perhaps might weaken the search results, so I won't add it, even though I can see it. It's not really, you know, the key focus of this product shot. So that's just something to bear in mind.
And the children will be learning about serif fonts, looks like, too.
Yes, especially in design. So that's a really good keyword, and one that it reminds me of is when working on stock libraries or for stock libraries, we have like different terms for the different styles of language. So we'll have orthographic text, which means words like with letters, as opposed to pictographic text, which could be hieroglyphs or Mandarin. So for example, we can get, if we're looking at images that are around language and lettering and font and type and things like that, we would have quite a deep, rich taxonomy or thesaurus to help describe those kinds of languages, those words, everything down to the accents and the umlauts and things like that, if they're visible. So English language is a really valid keyword to have, because it helps customers filter out the type of language that they might be looking for, if that's part of their, you know, their creative campaign. And serif. And
how do we know? How do we know when to stop?
Well, you do get the feel for it when you've been doing it for 20 years. You can probably stop now, but what you've got here also helps kind of jog your brain cells a little bit, because I was just thinking about taking a step back and not thinking so much about the finer details. I was thinking we don't really have a keyword for, let's say, tradition or vintage, heritage. And I think these things, you know, as opposed to plastic toys and toys that are battery operated, this is a really classic vintage traditional toy. And I think it would be really nice to distinguish that from, you know, the more kind of whiz bang electronic toys. So you would probably add something like that as well. So depending on what your keywording system looks like, you wouldn't necessarily be keywording in this type of tool if you were keywording lots of images for your website, your product shots, or your image bank or whatever. You would then at some point decide to stop, and you would save this all as metadata, and that sits with the visual asset. So this is information about the photograph, which is of an object. So we're kind of using that metadata then to find the photographs of these specific objects. And as I said at the beginning of today's chat, this could be for internal staff in a company. It could be the marketing team, the advertising team looking for visuals to kind of do some kind of print publicity campaign or website banner, that kind of thing. Or it could be that you're selling this content on a shop, on an e-shop, and the metadata is therefore your ticket to presenting and surfacing these images of the products that you can sell to your customers to the people that are coming to buy stuff on your website. So the metadata at the moment looks quite unstructured. The keywords look quite messy, but they would all be streamlined and refined, and in some cases they'd be synonymized, and they may not be visible in the end to the customer, but it does mean that when a customer comes on, right, I'm looking for traditional wooden toys, oh, what are they called? ABC block, alphabet block, I can't remember. And then whatever they type in will at some point be attached to this image, and it will come back to them in a search result. So this is kind of the golden, the holy grail really, to making your content surfaceable and visible to your potential buyers. How did you find the exercise?
I found it really eye-opening because, yeah, it's like, okay, I like brainstorming, the first thing, but like my process was, first I'm going to look at this and I'm just going to observe. And I think that's probably why I got so much visual elements, and other people probably do that too. And then you kind of wear yourself out, like, well, I think I've covered most of the visual elements. And then it's like, okay, what can I do more conceptually? What am I doing with the blocks? What can we learn with the blocks? So then more words started coming out of me that perhaps I hadn't thought of before. And I also liked how you kept guiding, well, here's another thing to think about. Here's another thing to think about, to get you really into, okay, what kind of structure can we put this in? Because otherwise it's, like you said, it's very unstructured, and this puts a structure to the brainstorm process really quickly.
I think the biggest danger is to just look at what you can see as a keyword and think, I can see, and then create a whole bunch of keywords around that, because we're not just doing this to tick boxes, of required fields. There is a purpose and a point to the keywords, and that is to help customers. So we're not just adding what we can see, we're adding what we think the value of what we can see will be to a customer. And that's a whole different process to tagging. So tagging an image of, let's say, I'm trying to think of something that we all share, a product that we all share in common, let's say peanut butter, a jar of peanut butter. We can tag that as a jar of peanut butter, and we can tag the brand name. And that is literally what it is. But if you are looking to enrich the way your customers engage with your content and find it, you might want to start adding things associated with your brand as keywords. So it's no palm oil, it's 100% organic. These aren't keywords you can see on the label or the jar, but they're in that product. And as keywords, this changes the relationship your clients have with your products. Something very simple, and I don't think people really appreciate the power of keywords. I think they think it's just you need keywords because that's a field that's there, so you have to put something in. Try and think about how you can optimize your keywords, because it really does make the difference between just selling products based on the lowest common denominator and really finding an appeal that will broaden your customer base. And let's face it, people are getting much more search savvy now. They are spending more time online. They can search on the go all the time throughout the day. They want the keywords to work quickly and to give relevant results. So, checking what they're searching for on your logs, on your search logs is equally important. And it costs nothing to do that. You can run off that report and instantly see what they're searching for and what they're not finding, and then you can address that with your keywords.
Yeah, and
I
think
like that.
very good point you made about tagging things like what type of element is it? It's an image, and you mentioned the clipping path, and that just like gets us to where we need to examine who is looking for this. I mean, somebody that's buying the blocks isn't really interested in a clipping path, but somebody who works with this image, certainly would be.
Yeah, so one of the first questions as a consultant I ask is, who is your user? And sometimes it's two types of users. It could be internal, so advertising, marketing, design teams, and external, B2C, retail website. So you can't have one method for keywording. Your method will be defined by who your users are. And as I've said before, keywording is all about user-centered design and user-focused design and user experience. And yeah, you're right, Scott. You need to ask yourself who the customer is or who the user is in order to know what to add and then maybe what not to add.
Right, and I think one of the markers for success here is that other is not our largest category.
Yeah, I think this can depend so much on the image as well. And
Yeah.
This image is what I would call it's a product shot. So it's a what you see is what you get. Where we get a lot of other will be in things like editorial photography, shots from the 1950s baseball games, or shots of royalty attending, an entertainment event on the red carpet. There's a lot of additional information that we might need to add around what was happening at the time, what was the context at the time. There'd been maybe some key event in history or in geography that needs to be attached to the asset because it has meaning for that photograph. And these things are less easy to define. Like, you can slap this keyword here and this one here, but there's a lot of other keywords when you're looking at more specialist content. I work with specialist libraries that produce scientific content or content on the theme of the environment and the changes to the global state, the state of the world globally. The keywords are so specialist, it's not always easy to define them as a category as such. And then in the case of this image, it's more easy to do that way. Where you see you have fewer keywords that are loose, that don't have a home, you can actually home most of the keywords on this kind of image.
One of the reasons I picked this image is because wooden ABC blocks are often used as a metaphor in business for simplicity, basic, fundamental. So I thought this was going to be a really easy keyword thing. I'm like, okay, it'll just be a few brief examples, but it kind of highlights that even a simple or a basic fundamental product can have a lot of different dimensions to it. And another thing that you said, it made me think of how different people search for things cognitively too. We need to respect where people are differently cognitively. That if you asked a child, what do a train and a bike have in common? They might say they both have wheels. Whereas if you ask an adult, they might say, well, they're both modes of transportation. One is kind of a lower, more visual element oriented, and the other has got a higher cognitive or a higher executive function attached to it. So understanding not just what you see, like, yeah, they both have wheels, but what they both are fundamentally.
And this is why keywords are both literal and conceptual, because they help different people access information. So it is more of an equal experience across the board, because finding information should be a basic human right now. And, we do have different understanding of language. We have different backgrounds and experiences and educational levels. So we need to try and make the keywords really work for all types of user. That's a really good example with the mode of transport, because in a hierarchy or a controlled vocabulary, you would use the structure of the dictionary or the thesaurus to help users search in those different ways. So you might have mode of transport as a top level category. Then you might have land transport, which would be your wheeled vehicles. But you may also have water transport, which would be your boats and your submarines, and air transport, your helicopters and your drones, your aircrafts and things like that. So if you are a child coming in looking for the thing with wheels, the bicycle, you can use that as a search term because it's recognized as a keyword in this, hierarchical structure. But equally, you're saying grown-ups will go, well, they're both modes of transport. Yes, you can search like that because that information will also be embedded in the metadata. So it's, I think, interesting that what is hidden behind the scenes, what you can't see when you're searching online, is the exact thing that helps you find, what it is you're looking for online. And it's just keywords, it's metadata, but it's how you think about those and how you structure them and apply them that makes the big difference.
It's even an inclusivity issue, isn't it? Because you're including a lot more people. Definitely.
I was just writing something today for some business development work that I'm doing at the moment for my own company. And I was asked to think about what my why is, and it came to me instantly. It's about making information, as much relevant information as available to as many people as possible. I hate to think that in a classroom, a certain child who has a lower reading ability cannot access certain texts because they are difficult and they don't have that level of comprehension yet. So we teach them and help them and support them. Online, of course, on the internet, we don't have that support. We have people who have more or less ability to navigate a website. We've got a digital divide here in the UK. Far more people in the southern part of our country are digitally literate than they are in the north. That impacts on the way people can search for jobs, the way they can update their CV, look for information around making them more attractive to a potential employer. This is all going to have a knock-on effect. If we can't make the information as easy to find by as many people as possible, certain groups of society will miss out on that information, and that will impact on them downstream. And I think this is my why. It looks like I sit in keyword pictures all day, and I do a lot of that, but I'm thinking behind that, the reason I'm doing it is to provide that as a service, access to information as a service. So yeah, I'm really thinking about that a lot in my day-to-day work.
Well, terrific. That's what you do. And I'm sure that there's another step after this that you also tackled. Could you just tell us briefly about that?
In addition to the keywording?
Correct.
Yeah, so some people need help to learn about how to keyword. So everything we've just done here as a little group, it can be taught, and I do help some clients with workshops like this, and also looking at their specific collections and their content and helping them decide what keywords would be useful for them and their customers, and all those discovery questions that we've touched on today, like who's the end user, how do they search, what's the business culture like, what are you trying to convey, in terms of your values. This all feeds into the work I do with clients on a strategy side. So yeah, that's an equally fascinating part of my business, and it gives you great insight into the way language tells you so much about your place in the world and who you're connecting with and why. And I absolutely love that about my job.
So regarding the controlled vocabularies, okay, so we have, this brainstorming result here. Some may not make the cut as far as are going to be official, keywords, tagging the images and all that. But what is a good, I got some guidelines for what should make the cut for a controlled vocabulary, because while you want things to be as complete and as useful as possible, and you want to cut out spelling errors, etc., from the search process, nobody wants to go through an infinite scroll to do a keyword search.
Yeah, so I think a controlled vocabulary is quite a personal thing to each business, and you can buy them, you can, get them off the shelf. The problem with those is they're very generic, and they'll miss the specific nuances of language that you need for your particular organization. So whether this is a kind of taxonomy for a legal firm or a pharmaceutical company, or, a field I'm familiar with, stock photography and conceptual imagery, you need your taxonomy or your controlled vocabulary to really reflect your business and your market. So, your customers and their language. And I usually advise people to generate a controlled vocabulary based on the language that they know is most familiar to their customers. And we talked about a preferred term as opposed to a synonym. So, you know, your synonyms might be slang terms, variant terms, UK, US, English, you know, variations. But the preferred term should be the one that you feel is the one most people engaging with your organization or your product is likely to use. And somebody in the company will need to make a judgment on that. But I do find it's often like your gut feeling that is right when it comes to creating a vocabulary, trying to keep it, you know, accessible. We talked about, you know, inclusivity and, you know, making things egalitarian as far as you can in terms of the language, and making it as broad and specific as it needs to be. So as kind of far-reaching and specific as you need it to be. If you're specializing in wooden toys and you've got thousands of lines in different colorways, and you know they're made from different types of wood, these are specific things about wooden blocks that you need to capture in your vocabulary. Let's say you are making toys in general and you've got some wooden blocks, but you've also got the electronic toys, the STEM toys, battery operated toys. You've got, you know, other types of toys around different themes or brands. Then your vocabulary will need to reflect that. And it may not have as many specific keywords about the materials, perhaps, but it might have more conceptual keywords or more descriptive keywords about how they can be used, you know, what context they can be used in. Are they used in schools and colleges? Are they used for special needs children? Are they used by, you know, are they gifts that you might gift at a christening or a baptism and that kind of thing? So depending on your specific products, your services, the information that you have that you're trying to make available to the customers that you're trying to reach, you kind of work back from all of that and create a controlled vocabulary that really reflects all of those aspects as much as it needs to. And again, like we've seen with keywording, don't grow a vocabulary structure for the sake of it. You know, keep it tight, keep it relevant, grow it when it needs to grow it perhaps when you've got a new product line coming in and you want to expand that part of a tree. We call them a tree sometimes of keywords, which is like a folder structure. So we grow parts of the vocabulary structure out as and when we need to. We don't just think, well, let's create a structure for types of fruit. If you don't sell fruit, there's absolutely no value in doing that. So, you know, just keep it relevant, keep it tight, keep editing it. I think that's a big piece of advice. Actually, you need to consider renaming terms when they become not politically correct anymore or not acceptable anymore. This is coming up a lot in creative photography, particularly on some of the sensitive issues around terms for ethnic groups, demographic groups, social economic groups, and things like that.
Clemency, how can people get in touch with you?
I have a website, which is clemency.co.uk, and I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so you should find me by searching Clemency Wright on there as well.
So Clemency Wright, I'll put those details and your links in the comments.
Yes, let's do that.
And what final message would you like to leave people with?
Just think about keywords as being your friend. Don't be afraid of them or find them boring. Have a think about the things we've talked about today, start to see the value in them, and hopefully people who aren't fully optimizing their keywords at the moment will start to see the benefits. And yeah, just get in touch if you've got any questions on how you might go about doing that.
Is there anything else we should know about keywords?
Well, I'd like to run a session where we talk about alt text, which is on your website to help for accessibility to visually impaired users. And this ties in a lot with content writing and keywording for online businesses. So that's another thing to think about as well, which we can discuss on a separate session.
Well, terrific. You would be willing to come back and join us again for another session.
Yeah, hopefully people will find that interesting. If you're working in the online space and you want to think about these things, accessibility, findability, searchability, then yeah, alt text is probably something you'd be interested to learn more about.
Terrific. Until next time.